in the annulment of this, and I support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think the first thing I should do is commend the Committee on Delegated Legislation and even single out the chairman for the job that he has done very committedly in securing this subsector we are calling the scrap metal subsector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if your memory serves you right, you would remember that I presented to this House a petition where I was seeking for the lifting of what I considered to be an unconstitutional and illegal moratorium, which in itself is just semantics. It's not a moratorium. It is actually a blanket ban on the trade of scrap metal in this country, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, some of us who are standing here are not supporting any illegality or illegal sabotage of installations or infrastructure. What we are saying is that you will not ban the trade of meat in butcheries just because there is cattle rustling in Baringo. It would not be making sense. It's not logical, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, yes, there could be some fraudulent scrap metal business going on, but they are legit dealers in scrap metal in this country, Mr. Speaker. Some of them doing extremely specialized business. For example, Mr. Speaker, the metals that come out of technological gadgets, whether they are phones, whether they are TVs, whether they are radios, whether they are computers, whether they are microwaves, these metals carry hazardous materials that cannot afford to be left out in the environment for them to sink very hard metals like lead into our soil and into our rivers. But Mr. Speaker, since the banning of scrap metal trade in this country, the accumulation of electronic waste, especially in this city, is alarming, Mr. Speaker. We are all sitting ducks, waiting to die out of cancer caused out of moratoriums that are not very well thought through, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, why I support the annulment in entirety is because even with the opportunity to go and prepare regulations, the ministry has come back to this House and tabled timelines, first of all, out of the statutory timelines, Mr. Speaker. They missed the deadline. Secondly, if you go into the regulations that they are giving, and specifically in Part 2, Mr. Speaker, you will find that the regulations that are being stipulated there are actually contrary to the Statutory Instruments Acts, Mr. Speaker. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, the issue of public participation. Kenyans are stakeholders in this trade. Mr. Speaker, where is the evidence of robust public participation happening on these regulations, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, I do support the Committee on Delegated Legislation. I do encourage the chairman to now, talk with his ministry so that we can have an unconditional lifting of the scrap metal ban, which I believe is illegal and unconstitutional. Mr. Speaker, on the basis of it being unconstitutional, on the basis of it going against the Scrap Metals Act, and on the basis of it contravening the Statutory Instruments Act, I do support the annulment of these regulations in their entirety. And I would like to finally say, Mr. Speaker, this was unnecessary. We have a law that was put in place in 2015 that regulates this subsector called the scrap metal industry. And if we only implemented the law to the letter, we would not be needing to be having all these other physical education games that are being played around the scrap metal trade, with even illegal moratoriums and bans that are actually strangling an industry. But Mr. Speaker, this is not unique. The same thing is happening to the timber trade, Mr. Speaker. The same thing is happening to the loggers. Cities are closing down, towns are closing down. When we impose mandatory bans, blanket bans on the industries without considering that there are hustlers who make a living out of these industries. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I'd like to support with all the strength I have the annulment of these regulations in their entirety. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
The Honorable Kiare, this expression, this physical education games, is that